Hello, I'm Vicki Leroux with Create and Adorn. Thank you for joining me today for this quick tutorial video where we are going to just focus on making loops when you are creating earrings. So there's two types of loops that we generally use. I call it a basic loop, just your basic loop that we would make when we are making a little head pin earring and we'd attach your ear wire. But sometimes we also use a wire wrap loop, which looks really similar. It's just a little loop and then a wrap at the bottom before you kind of have the beads or design. But that creates the loop for your ear wire. And I can show you a couple little pieces here, right? So there's just a basic loop we would think of that goes around. But our wire wrap loop looks so similar, but there's a little wrap underneath it there. And the difference generally is determined by how thin or thick the wire is, which is generally determined by the size of the hole in the bead you're using. So we're going to make two little earrings, one with a basic loop and one with a wire wrap loop, and then I can talk a little bit about the individual sizes and hole sizes quickly. I'm not going to go into tools and the particulars about the wire or too much about the gauges. Our Wirework series is multiple parts, so I definitely have a video that will have all that logistical information. This is just to focus on the loop for earrings. So we're going to start with a head pin. That's generally the pin that runs through the middle of your earring. This is a ball head pin. There's a little ball at the bottom. You definitely don't need it. It's only for aesthetics, for decoration. This is thicker. It's 20 gauge. And I'm using a glass pearl. And any kind of glass bead or crystal bead will have a larger hole because it's man-made. When it has a larger hole, we can use a thicker wire or thicker head pin in this case. So this fits nicely. We want the head pin that we're using really to fill the hole, not to be too thin so the bead bounces all over the place, just to really fill it properly. So then I'm going to add a couple more little doodads to decorate it. I'm going to add a cap and a crystal at the top. You definitely don't need this kind of stuff. It's just accents that I'm going to put on. But let's say that's going to be our earring, right? This pretty little glass pearl with the cap. So we need to make a loop at the top to attach our ear wire. I'm going to cut this wire and then bend it over. Now, some people bend and then cut. It literally does not matter which order you do this in, whatever maybe you're used to doing or you've seen before, whatever's comfortable for you. I cut first, and I'll show you why in just a sec. But I normally cut first. The length of wire you leave will determine the size of your loop. So the longer or the more wire we leave, the larger your loop is going to be. The shorter it is, the smaller your loop is going to be. So generally when we're teaching this loop, a half an inch or just under is a good rule of thumb. That makes a pretty good sized loop. That way you could always cut it down if it really was too big, but we can't make it bigger once we've cut it too short. So this is about a half an inch or so, a little under. I'm going to cut that wire, and when I cut the wire, I tip the earring over, hang on to the beads with my non-dominant hand, but so the wire doesn't fly off and hit someone. So we're left with our little piece of wire here in our earring. Now I'm going to use a chain nose pliers. Again, I'm not going to go too much into pliers here, but chain nose is smooth inside, not a needle nose. Needle nose has all the little ridges inside. That's not what these are. Those ridges will end up on your wire or jewelry, so we don't use them for jewelry making. So I'm going to grab right at the top of the bead here with my chain nose pliers and bend that piece of wire back towards me about 90 degrees. You could also use your thumb and like bend it right over. We just want a nice 90-degree bend on there. Then we're going to use your round nose pliers. And I'm going to turn this little wire till it's pointing towards me. And your round nose pliers are just that. The tip is completely round. It's smaller at the tip. It gets fatter towards the box joint. This allows you to decide the size of loop you're going to make depending on where you grab it along the nose. A better quality plier will be completely round. A lesser quality, really cheaply made round nose pliers will be flat inside. And I only mention it because if you're having trouble with your loop being round, take a look at your pliers and make sure it's not that first. So often it's in the quality and the materials we're using, it's not us. So a good quality pliers be completely round and not have that flat inside. So that piece of wire is pointing towards me. I'm going to grab it about 1/4 inch up on the plier itself because that's the size of loop I want. If there's like a standard size, you use all the time, a lot of people will Sharpie it, like put a little Sharpie mark on their round nose pliers so they're always grabbing it in the same place. That's helpful. I'm just going to eye it, but I'm about 1/4 inch up on the plier itself and grabbing on right at the tip of that piece of wire that's pointing towards me. My dominant hand is facing out that I have the pliers in. This is so I can roll it away, so palm out. Now, my non-dominant hand, my thumbnail, needs to go in that little bend there that we made, and that's to hold it or put a little pressure on it. If we don't hang on to that, when we go to roll it, the bend will just come right out. So I'm going to put a little pressure there with my thumbnail, my non-dominant hand, and then I'm going to go ahead and roll and kind of roll this. I like to do it in one roll, but if it can't, that's okay. What's great about, and I'm using a German wire, a German silver wire. The wire is very flexible, very forgiving. So there's always time and room to adjust it. I just made a little loop there. So just that basic loop. You can, like I said, always play with it if you need to, whatever you need to do to get it round. Right? Then to put on our ear wire, oftentimes ear wires open on their own, but to open this link or loop once we've made it, we don't ever stick the plier back in the loop. We don't want to distort the loop we made. You go from the side with your chain nose pliers and grab onto the side, and I call it kind of opening and closing a door or window, whatever you want to look at. So the side, I'm going to open and put on our ear wire. And like I said, even though most ear wires actually open, just for the sake of this video, and then I close it right back up in place. And then you have your little earring. All good to go. Right, with our loop. Yeah, lovely. Okay. So that was for if you're doing a bead that has a larger hole or a good size hole. That was, like I said, a glass pearl. If we are using a freshwater pearl or a natural gemstone, the holes in those are smaller. And so that means we need to use a thinner gauge wire or a thinner gauge head pin in this case when we work with it. So this is a little thinner gauge head pin. I'm going to straighten this out real quick. Using a little wire straightener there. Okay. Now, I used a ball head pin in that first example. You definitely don't have to. They're quite a bit pricier than a regular head pin. You also, if you didn't have any, you could just string a little 2mm bead on to the bottom of your head pin, and now you have a ball head pin. So either way. So this is a 24 gauge head pin, and I'm going to string on a freshwater pearl, so a real pearl, not a glass pearl. Its hole is smaller, so it needs that thinner gauge head pin. And just like the other one, I put on a little cap and a little crystal to just kind of jazz it up. So there's our earring there, and there's our start of an earring. So we don't just want to make the same loop like we made with the thicker wire. Since this is a thinner gauge head pin, if we just make a basic loop like we did in the previous one, the wire's too thin, that'll just pull out. It won't stay in place. So it needs a loop and a wrap. So we're going to use all the same pliers, but in a little different order. I'm going to start with my chain nose pliers. I'm at the very tip of the plier and right against the top bead there. Right. I'm going to take the index finger of my non-dominant hand and push the wire over the pliers. This creates the neck where the wrap is going to go. So if I pull my plier away, see I've got that little teeny space above the bead, that's the neck where the wrap is going to end up going. So this only ever needs to be like big enough for 2 or 3 wraps max. So that's why I do it at the very tip of the pliers. If you go further up the plier, you'll make the neck longer, and then you'll have to do more wraps. So you not only use more wire, doing that aesthetically, it's not as pretty either to have that long of a neck. For this to be secure, it only needs like 2, and it's good to go. So as small as possible. Then I'm going to take that earring component, turn the wire so it's pointing towards me again, and with my round nose pliers, palm facing out, I'm going to grab the same point on the pliers, so about that 1/4 inch up, but I'm also going to be about a 1/4 inch up on that wire that's pointing towards me. So I'm the same place on the plier, but I'm about a 1/4 inch, 1/3 of an inch up from that bend. If you can kind of visualize where the top of the loop is going to be, that's where that plier needs to be. So same thing, dominant hand, palm facing out. I'm going to roll this away in just a second, but my non-dominant hand, my thumbnail, needs to go right in that bend. Very important, because we can't lose that bend. Once that's in place, I'm going to roll that halfway and stop. I roll halfway and stop and pull out the plier to make sure I have half a circle or half a loop. If you don't have this shape, the wire, again, very forgiving, very flexible. You can get in there and play with it a little bit. It's really common for that loop to go whew, or just be a different shape. So, but once we have it the right shape, where I'm looking at half a loop, I'm going to stick the plier right back in like I never took it out. So it's right in the exact same space, wires down away from me. I'm going to grab onto that piece of wire with my non-dominant hand, and I'm going to pull the wire onto the plier to complete the loop. And my hands, this dominant hand's not going to do anything. I'm going to pull this wire over, cross it over to complete that loop. And when I pull the plier out, it's very important that my little tail is right where the bend is. Let me just get that illustrated. There we go. Is crossing over right where that bend is, right? And if it doesn't, if it's higher or lower, it just means you didn't grab it in the very same place with the plier again. You can get in there again and adjust it if you need to. But once that tail's crossing where the bend is, we're going to turn our earring component. I have it in my dominant hand. The loop is facing my left side. I know it's backwards for the camera. And the wire is pointing it to the ceiling. I'm going to take the chain nose pliers, the flat one, in my non-dominant hand. Hold it straight up and down, which for me is my left, in my non-dominant hand. It's going to go over this loop, not in it, over it, to hang on to it. Now my dominant hand is free, and I have a hold of my earring, and I can start to do the wrap with this piece of wire. So you can do it with your hands. I like to use the round nose pliers. I like to grab onto the end of the wire, and I'm just going to wrap this around that neck I made. And again, 2, 3 times just to cover that neck, and she's good. Then, once that's covered, I'm going to take cutter and cut that little tail off. This is where it's good if you have a fine nose cutter that cuts sharp all the way to the tip. A lot of side cutters are not like that. They're rounded like that. This allows you to get really close in with wire wrap. So if you're going to do a lot of wire wraps, it's nice to have that. Even getting that close, you might have a little bit of burr, a little bit left. You can take your chain nose pliers, or I'm going to take the top of a crimping plier and use the top section of that plier to tuck that down. Then I have my loop and a wrap. Right? Now, the issue with this is I can't open it now. Unlike the basic loop, once the wrap is done and closed, it's closed. So, luckily, most earrings open, and you can just slip on that part without having to open it. And I'll just slip on my little ear wire, and then I have my earring. So if for some reason your ear wire didn't open, which I've never seen one that doesn't, then you might need to hook it on before you wrap it. But for an earring, you can go ahead and close it and then hook it onto the earring or the ear wire that you want. And that is it my dear, there's your basic loop for an earring and a wire wrap loop for your earrings. I have another video in this series that is how to link the different loops together. So you can check that one out too if you haven't already. Thank you so much for joining me. Now go out there and sparkle brightly like the star that you are. Mwah! Peace.